I've been teaching thousands of golfers how to shoot their lowest scores for over a decade. And let me be honest, it's mostly how to stop all of you from shooting yourself in the foot by increasing your golf IQ, not through more swing tips. Let me show you how to reach your scoring goals by removing these 7 low IQ golf shots that are blowing up your rounds. For each shot, I'm going to share a common situation, the flawed logic that golfers choose, and how it damages scores so much. But more importantly, you're going to learn how to make better decisions each time. Let's start with number 1. You're hitting way too many non-stock shots. There is this romantic version of golf that's been talked about for over 100 years, and it really sounds wonderful. You're hitting draws into back left pins and fades into back right ones. Based on how much green you have to work with, you choose between a bump and run, a medium trajectory wedge shot, or even a flop shot. And when you're into a strong wind, you pull out that nice punch shot on command. Or you can match your shot shape to the dogleg off the tee. Now, for an incredibly select, skilled few golfers, this game does exist. But for everyone else who gets to practice maybe once a week or play twice a month, these shots are an absolute disaster and end up costing far more strokes than they are worth. And what it's really about is deviating from your stock shot versus trying to play a bunch of different techniques based on the situation you're in. For example, a player that usually fades the ball actually stands to lose more when playing a draw. Now, why is that? Well, in order to play a different shot shape, you're going to have to alter your swing path and, more importantly, where your club face is pointing at impact. Now, most golfers do have the ability to change their club path from, let's say, out to in to the opposite, which would be in to out. You can make some adjustments in your stance and your swing intentions. But it's typically much harder to control where your club face is pointing when you're not used to hitting a draw. And that's when our adversary, the double cross, starts to show up. That's essentially when your club face is pointing way outside of your swings path and the ball goes in the complete opposite direction of what you wanted. So that's when you're trying to play a fade and then you pull hook it, or trying to play a draw and then you hit this absolutely massive push slice. These shots are absolute round killers. And they are the result of poor execution because the golfer just didn't put in the reps or just isn't capable of that shot in general. So if most of you are interested in shooting the lowest score possible, which is the point of golf, you have to kind of give up that romantic situational version of golf in your mind and commit to becoming more of a stock shot player. Now, whether that's with your driver, your irons, or your wedges, the idea is to get really comfortable with one kind of swing intention and then resist the urge to go outside of it, even if the situation is pulling you to something else. Now, what's funny is some of the most successful pro golfers have come to similar conclusions about the game. There's a laundry list of players like Brooks Koepka, who came out in the pro ranks thinking that he had to master every type of shot to become a better player. And then he realized if he could just hit his stock shot most of the time, which is a cut, he'd fare way better. And I think he did fare pretty good. So don't undersell yourself on simplicity and comfort. I always say that golfers should aspire to be like a Michelin-starred restaurant that's known for maybe that one exceptional dish versus that crappy roadside diner that has a menu as thick as a phone book and you know that whatever you're ordering isn't going to be that good. Now let's move on to the easiest way to lower your scores literally overnight. Stop chasing front pins, or all of them for that matter. Now, in my last video, I discussed how using laser rangefinders often lure golfers into really bad decision making on approach shots. And a common scenario is choosing a club to a front pin. It's probably one of the worst scoring decisions that anyone can make. Even PGA Tour players make this mistake, and here's why it should grab your attention. Years ago, Decade Golf analyzed how often tour players hit greens based on a front pin position or a back pin position. And what they found was that tour players hit roughly 25% more greens when the pin was in the back of the green compared to the front. And the reason's pretty simple. Tour players are so good with their distance control that they do try and thread the ball into a front pin position. But for most of them, it ends up costing them more strokes than it's worth, versus just taking more club and giving themselves a little bit more cushion towards the middle of the green. Now that's for the best players in the world. Imagine what happens when a 5, 10, or 15 handicap tries to land the ball in that 5 to 10 yard window in front of the green. Now, in ShotScope's database of millions of golf shots, every single handicap level misses greens ranging from 25 to 70% on the front side. In other words, they never take enough club. And what's interesting is that no matter if you are a scratch or 20 handicap, the misses long are only about 5% of shots over the green. So let's say that you had a pin that's a few paces on the green at about 135 yards, but the middle number is 150 yards and the back of the green is 165 yards. Now, if you're going to choose a club that's going to land you about 135 to 140 yards, you've already kind of short-sighted yourself and trying a shot that has a really low percentage of success versus just focusing on a yardage somewhere between that 150 to 165 number. This is why I encourage golfers to use a GPS device that gives you the middle and back yardage of every green that you're playing, so that you can simply give yourself this buffer and not try to squeeze the ball in that tiny little window in front of the green. A lot of your scoring in golf is about how many greens you hit, and more importantly, leaving yourself manageable wedge shots when you do miss the green so that you can make bogeys at worst. This is why it's so important to resist chasing that front pin or even any pin that's tucked towards the edge of the green in just about any position. Boo Weekley had a great quote that golfers need to live by: "The center of the green never moves." So you need to resist the urge of letting the pin pull you into that really low IQ golf shot. Take more club, especially to the middle or back number, and avoid the edges of the green when you aim. It's such a basic way to lower your scores that has a guaranteed return. Now let's move on to low IQ golf shot number 3. You are reckless or way too safe off the tee. Now, a lot of golfers are throwing away a ton of strokes simply by the club that they're choosing on the tee box, and it often veers to extremes with most players. Now, I'd say it's more common that a lot of golfers will play it too safe than getting way too aggressive. They're going to defer to irons, hybrids, or fairway woods versus their driver because it makes them feel a bit warmer and fuzzier inside on the tee box. But typically, they've got two things working against them that is costing them strokes when they choose these shorter clubs. Number one, their safety clubs are not nearly as straight as they think. Now, I've done other videos where I've shown some data amongst different handicap levels showing that 3-woods do not hit more fairways for most players compared to their driver. Now, even in my own testing with shorter clubs, I've seen that they're not as straight as I assumed. And the second reason that shorter clubs is costing strokes is even more important. When a golfer pulls that shorter club, they are guaranteeing that that next shot is harder because they are laying 20, 30, or even 50 yards back. One thing has become abundantly clear with modern analytics: golf is a game of proximity. A 150-yard shot from the fairway is statistically harder than a 100-yard shot from the rough. And worse, you don't even guarantee that you're going to hit the fairway with that shorter club off the tee. You are just guaranteeing a longer shot into the green. So don't fall victim to using shorter clubs on holes that aren't as demanding off the tee just because it makes you feel safer. You've already made the hole harder for yourself with that decision. Now, some people would tell you that it's smart to hit a 4-iron versus your driver just to keep it in play, but they are not correctly factoring in proximity and likely overestimating how accurate you are with the 4-iron. Now, people get so caught up with the idea of bomb and gouge on the PGA Tour, but the truth is that distance is way more important for shorter hitters than it is for tour players. In other words, laying back 20 to 30 yards costs a 15 handicap significantly more strokes than a PGA Tour player. But there is a flip side to this. Not every hole that you play should be a driver. Now, sometimes golfers do the opposite and they try and thread their driver into a narrow zone surrounded by trouble, or they get a little too aggressive on a tight dogleg that doesn't fit their shot shape, and they just needlessly throw away strokes due to penalties or recovery situations like the bunkers or trees. And they do this by playing for a very low percentage outcome. So optimizing your scoring off the tee is knowing when to pump the brakes and then step on the gas a little bit. Now, there's obviously way more nuance to this, and I go much deeper into detail on how to make those decisions in my book, The 4 Foundations of Golf. But one of the best signs of a high IQ golfer is that they are making those optimal decisions more often based on the layout of each hole that they're playing, and they're also taking into consideration their tendencies off the tee, versus the low IQ golfer who just kind of wings it based on how they're feeling in the moment or maybe how their scoring is going for that day. And they're just using golf advice that is a bit outdated at this point. Now, before I get into the lowest IQ shot of them all, let me tell you about the sponsor of this video, WhyGolf. If you've been following me for a while, you know that most golf improvement comes from making better decisions. decisions, not mindlessly beating balls on the range. That's why I've partnered with the WhyGolf app on this video. It's a best-in-class GPS and GIN integrated app designed to help you play smarter golf. You get detailed yardages and green slope maps. You know exactly where you cannot miss your approach shots, which I talked about earlier in this video. And you also get a digital green reader that tells you exactly where to aim your putts so that you can train your green reading. And there are also plenty of other handy tools like a swing thoughts log and an AI coach that helps you stay disciplined and keep your game from falling off the rails. Now, if you want to play smarter golf, which is the whole point of this video, use the link in the description to start your 7-day free trial. Okay, let's keep going with our fourth topic. So if you're watching one of my videos, you know that I'll never waste an opportunity to talk about where golfers waste the most strokes. But if you think about it another way, it's where they can also save them quickly. Perhaps the lowest IQ shot of them all is the heroic escape attempt, which is our fourth shot. This is when you're in the trees and you're still trying to get the ball on the green, or you're trying to clear that lip in the fairway bunker, or muscle out that long iron from that horrible lie in the deep rough. You know what I'm talking about. You just hit that crappy tee shot, but that little voice in your head still wants to make up for the mistake and get the ball on the green. Essentially, what you are trying to do in this situation is play for par, when really playing for bogey is the correct decision or the correct intention. So you see that little opening and you think that you can hit a 20-yard cut around it, and 10 minutes later you are kicking yourself for making that triple bogey. I will say this until I am blue in the face. Lowering your handicap is about limiting damage in these situations, not hitting more towering iron shots that finish 5 feet from the pin. Now, I know this doesn't sound like fun to most of you and I sound like a broken record, but if you like taking your friends' money and posting lower scores and watching your handicap drop, then you just need to get the ball back to safety when you are in a tough spot after that poor tee shot. For most of you watching this, I guarantee you that will be the fastest way to lower your scores versus watching 25 YouTube videos on how to fix your slice. All right, let's move on to a scenario where things are actually going well for you, but then you sabotage yourself. This is our fifth topic, protecting a good round instead of playing it. So this is more of a general mindset than a specific low IQ golf shot, but it's a lesson that I've had to learn the hard way, breaking through various scoring barriers over the years. Now let's say you're off to a good start in your first 6 or 9 holes in your round. Your natural instinct is to start envisioning your future self celebrating whatever scoring barrier you just broke through, and then you become that turtle that goes back into its shell. You may have 9 holes left, but you start telling yourself that you have to play it safe in order to protect your score. You don't want to blow it, and then you assume that laying back off the tee or trying to slow down your swing or any other mindset that feels safe is going to get you in the clubhouse with the score that you are dreaming about. But I can assure you that golf does not work that way. In fact, when you enter that mindset of safety, that's actually when your biggest scores start showing up, because you have such a fear of something that technically you don't even have yet. Just because you're +2 through 8 holes doesn't entitle you to breaking 80. And this is where golfers really need to be at peace with whatever outcomes are possible in their rounds. For a long time, breaking 80 was that barrier for me, and then it was shooting under par or coming down the stretch in a club championship or a really important tournament that I'm playing in. And what I found was that if I could keep telling myself that the decisions that got me in that position are the same ones that will keep me there, versus feeling like I needed to go in some type of protection mode because I was just playing well. Here's the thing, golfers always complain about not being consistent, but what they fail to realize is that it's not really their scores or their shots that need to be amazingly consistent. It's really their intentions and their process. In other words, I believe you are going to play your best golf when you're actually agnostic to the situation you're in. You could be on the first hole of the day or on the 16th hole with your best score in sight. A good target is still the same. It should not change. You don't need a different pre-shot rehearsal. It should be exactly the same as it was on the first tee box when you didn't know what your score was at that point. Whenever I play under the most pressure, my safe haven is doing the same things over and over again. I know I can control those inputs, and you can too. And what I cannot control is whether I make birdies coming down the stretch or maybe start coughing it up with a few bogeys or worse. But I know that I have a much better chance if I'm okay with any scenario and just more committed to making good decisions no matter what's going to happen. Now, one thing I try to do is imagine my future self after a round and what I can live with. If I was playing well and all of a sudden I started changing my targets and my playing style, and that caused me to get more nervous and I kind of fell apart, I'd really regret that after the round. But if I did acknowledge that something good was going on, and even leaned into it and enjoyed the moment more, and just stuck with my plan, then I could feel really good about myself even if it didn't work out. And if I did break through and shoot that score, well, it would just be that much more satisfying to me afterwards. And here's the thing, everything that I just said can be applied to a round that actually starts poorly. Most golfers will try and do the opposite and get more aggressive and careless, and that doesn't work either. Always remember that in the long run, golf rewards consistency and your decisions and your process, but it's always going to throw inconsistency at you in terms of your results, which are the types of shot outcomes and scores you're going to see in the short term. This battle does not end. Now let's move on to our next low IQ golf shot, the short-sided hero. Most golfers are going to miss anywhere between 60 to 80% of the greens they play in every single round, which means that they will have a wedge in their hands quite often around the green. And the decisions you make in those situations can be the difference of making pars and bogeys versus double bogeys or worse. And before I talk about a common mistake that most of us make in these situations, let me explore what a good wedge shot looks like, because that is really important to understand. Because most golfers just have their expectations set way too high without knowing it. Now, on the PGA Tour, a typical player will average about 7 feet from the hole when they're just off the green at about that 10 to 20 yard range. Now, this is actually an incredible number, but it's bigger than most golfers would assume it would be. And from 7 feet, the tour player has about just over a 50% chance of making that putt, which is hardly a gimme. Now, what's interesting is that when you start looking at normal golfers, the number gets much, much larger. A typical scratch golfer, which is only about 1 to 2% of all players, will average about 11 feet from the hole with their wedges. A 10 handicap is going to be closer to 13 feet, and a 20 handicap will be about 17 feet. So it's really important to understand these numbers when you do step up to a wedge shot. If your definition of a good shot is getting the ball in a 3 to 5 foot circle around the hole, you've already set expectations that are way too high for your skill level. And because of that, you might choose the low IQ shot, which is a bit too difficult for you. So when you are short-sighted and you have only a very small target to land the ball before the hole, this is where those big numbers start happening, because you're still thinking that you should be making par, and then you start choosing a wedge technique that is going to add more loft and require a lot of touch. And because of that decision, now you've shifted some of your shot outcomes well short of the hole that might stay in the rough or a bunker, which really means you're likely making a double bogey at that point, or worse. Now, if you chose an alternate path and you just realized that getting the ball 10 to 20 feet from the hole is still an acceptable outcome, then you could just take the easier way out and plan on landing the ball a bit past the pin with your wedge. Now, this doesn't guarantee that you pull off the shot, but it just moves the odds more in your favor. All of these small decisions stack up during your round, and it's one of the main reasons you're going to shoot 103 versus shooting a 96 or a 94 instead of an 87. So when you do find yourself with that difficult wedge shot, don't ask yourself about the shot that can still get the ball close to the hole. Be more honest with your skills, and instead ask yourself, what's the club and the technique that gets the ball on the putting surface most of the time? And yes, there are golfers who have very advanced wedge games who can get a bit more aggressive in these situations. You just need to be honest with yourself if that's you or not. Low IQ shot number 7. You are not respecting the concept of capture speed. Let me explain. A golf hole is about 4¼ inches wide, but based on how hard you hit your putts, you can make the effective size of the cup much, much smaller. This image from Eric Barzeski using aim point data is very helpful because it shows you how large or how small you can make the cup based on how much speed your putt is carrying towards the hole and past it. For example, with perfect speed on a putt that drops on its last revolution, the hole is effectively its full size at 4¼ inches. But if your putts finish 2, 3, or even 5 feet by the hole, you start shrinking it down to about 2 inches wide, down to less than an inch wide. And this explains why you see so many of those frustrating lip outs when you're on the putting greens. I see this all the time play out in two scenarios. The first one is in match play. When a golfer is in a scenario where they have to make the putt and the next one doesn't matter, they get so fixated on not leaving the putt short. So they hit it much harder because we cannot shake that saying, never up, never in. And all that does is it actually reduces their chances of making the putt because they've effectively shrunk the hole down from 4¼ inches down to 1 or 2 inches wide. I also see this happening quite a bit on shorter putts, let's say inside that 6 to 8 foot zone. A lot of golfers are going to try and take the break out of the putt and just hit it harder, or they're so fixated on whether they're going to push or pull the putt that speed control doesn't even enter their mind. Either way, if you do want to make more putts, which I'm assuming you do, you have to balance making the hole as big as possible and also be okay leaving some of your putts short of the hole. Most putting experts would say an ideal speed is leaving your putts somewhere between 12 to 24 inches past the hole. Now obviously we fully can't control that, but it does mean that if your speed is good, that some putts will finish short of that intended distance and some farther past it. But if you're consciously trying to make sure that you get the ball past the hole at all costs, you're going to end up with so many putts finishing 3, 4, or 5 feet past the cup, which really means they never had a chance of going in unless they hit the dead center of the cup because they're carrying way too much speed. In my own personal journey to becoming a better putter inside 10 feet, I can tell you that proper speed control has become a really big part of it. I've seen way more putts creep in on the right edge or the left edge because my speed was better versus thinking that I had to take the break out of it by hitting the putt harder. So the big takeaway here is that you should not obsess over thinking you need a putt to finish past the hole in order for you to make it. Also, you should devote some of your practice time to speed control with your putter. It's really important. And also start keeping track of your dispersion long and short of the hole. If you do find that most of your putts are finishing past the hole, that's actually not a good sign. You need a bit more balance there, and just know that some of the best putters in the world will leave their putts shorter time, and it's not a sign of a bad putt. It's just the nature of having better speed control closer to the cup. So obviously I've covered a lot of shots in the video, and here is the good news in case you're feeling overwhelmed. You don't need to do all of this to optimize your scoring. Perfection is not required in golf. I continue to make a ton of the mistakes that I discussed in this video, and a lot of these are reminders to myself. But if you can get incrementally better at making smarter decisions in each round you play, you are making progress in your game. If you need help reinforcing any of the points I made in this video and want to get my entire blueprint on building a better golf game, you can check out my book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, on Amazon. And the YouTube algorithm thinks that this is the next best video of mine to watch.